Hello, gamers. Welcome to the IPR game room. And today we're going to be talking about magical industrial revolution. Now, magical industrial revolution is, as it says, a pre-apocalyptic setting guide, and we'll come back to what that means. Written by the game designer known only as Skirples. And I'm going to tell you right now that I'd like to meet Skirples because Skirples is hilarious. That's one thing I didn't expect when I first glanced at this book. Originally sent me in PDF form. I went through it. I wouldn't know what to expect, and it is extremely funny. I think that's the most important thing you need to know about it. In a dark, not very positive view of humanity kind of way, it is extremely funny. It is essentially a piece of Victoriana, though it doesn't have to be played that way, and we'll come back to that, much like the last game I reviewed, The Curse of the House of Rookwood. Um, it could be played over a somewhat longer and wider period of time, or rather, inserted into your fantasy game at a particular time, or used as a standalone setting, or it is modular. It could be inserted, but I'll come back to that. So you might ask, what does the author mean by a pre-apocalyptic setting guide? Well, what Magical Industrial Revolution does is it is a guide to an imaginary city called Indon. Now, Indon is pretty transparently London. And this is very apparent because the author, in fact, says this is very transparently London, though it could just as easily be Hong Kong or New York or any variety of other cities. Um, now, what it tells the story of is this city in the period before the magical industrial revolution that gives it its name um, causes an apocalypse. Now, this doesn't happen right away, and it happens because of innovations. Now, the basic conceit of Indon as a city is that it is an industrial revolution, and it may indeed have steampunk elements to it, and coal and mechanical things and all that. But the primary driver is, instead of all that sort of power generated by coal, it's power generated by magic. And magicians are odd, weird, flaky, criminal, some of them. And so you have a strange and uneven pace of technological innovation based on magical stuff. One of the most important thing in the games is innovations. And there are 8 sample innovations given in the book. And innovations affect the society of Indon in 6 steps. The first step is initial innovation, meaning someone or some group of people come up with a thing. The second step is public introduction, meaning they make it available to people. The third step is widespread adaptation, meaning everyone starts to use it. The fourth step is scope alteration, meaning the entire scope of the society is changed by the innovation. And the final step is high ambition. The person or people who created the thing suddenly gain a world spanning or perhaps world shattering ambition based on their invention. And finally, number 6, terminal events, which means that possibly the final use of the new innovation destroys the city or the world or the country, whatever it is. Now there is an option built into every innovation in Magical Industrial Revolution to where the player characters can sort of head this off. You can do this to prevent stage 6 terminal events. You can do that. Maybe you can prevent the technology from being implemented at all. But it strikes me that the idea of this game is you want to get to number 6 and see what happens. Another thing you can do to head off the apocalypse is sort of smash one apocalypse into another, is suggested, like cram one innovation into another, kind of like a Godzilla movie to stage off, the total apocalypse. Kind of like combating the metaphor Scripples uses is kind of like combating global warming with a nuclear winter. So that's part of it, is you're moving through time. As a fantasy setting, this really shouldn't be thought of, your typical fantasy setting, begins with Constantine and ends with Oliver Cromwell, if I can again quote the author. This does not. It's more this more begins with the Age of Cromwell and ends with World War One. So think more that time period and less fantasy. Though of course there's magic, so it is fantasy, but it is not medieval Tolkien-esque fantasy. It's something completely different. Now the book is a good-sized book. It's kind of old school, but like self-consciously and ironically old school, in a positive way, not in a way where you're like, okay, you love the thing, but you're making fun of it. No, I'd have to say Scribbles makes fun of everything. so so yes and no at the same time. There are a variety of chapters. The chapters include services in the imaginary study of Indon, social classes, the social season, magical industry, which goes into sort of how industrial revolution based on magic works, magic items, citizens, menagerie. There's a bunch of sample dungeons. They're small, but yes, there can be dungeon delving in Magical Industrial Revolution, and an extensive appendices at the end. Contains a lot of information. There's a lot of charts. There's a lot of graphs. There's a lot of sample spells that you can look at them and go, okay, my favorite magic, my favorite fantasy game. I could use this. I could see how I could use this thing to be pretty much like this other thing. It's very modular and generic. You could easily use some sort of D&D 5th edition, dungeon world. You could probably use this. Come to think of it, with Spire, that would be good. You could easily use it with Fantasy Hero. Really, any wide variety of things. You could probably use it with the Savage Worlds. Come to think of it, if you wanted to, or any sort of generic universal system easily. Any kind of non-generic system too. If you have a particular storytelling system that you like to use, you could easily just insert that into this too. I mean, it's really it is designed to be easily adaptable to that. So hats off to the author and our cousins over the seas. The author is very obviously British. In fact, it was shipped across seas from Britain. So he's very British. He has a very British sense of humor. It's very dry. It's very funny. This is a very funny product. I would totally add it to your game library, especially those of you running campaigns of various sorts. Now I think about it, really Spire, like it would do well with Spire. There's some interesting philosophical conversations in it. I won't spoil them, or I can open the book and read them to you, about the idea that are very topical for what's going on with discussions of fantasy races. Like, what does that mean? How is it? Is it kind of a stereotype? Are you better off maybe just having everyone be human, but maybe humans look different, since aren't really a lot of fantasy races, dwarves, elves, orcs, really just humans that sort of are extreme and exaggerated in one direction and look different. I mean, it has a lot of really kind of some philosophical comments to make that I think are topical to many of you watching this that buy things from IPR that you would appreciate. Yeah, pick it up. You can get it from us, and only from us if you're in the United States. The link is below. Also follow us on the social medias, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Subscribe to our Constant Contact newsletter. And remember, gamers, every new invention is a potential Pandora's box. Sorry, I actually meant every new invention is a potential Pandora's box. Andorra is a tiny country between France and Spain. Went there one time, a very strange place. Everyone looks like the Addams family, like Morticia and Gomez. But, if you're ever in Spain, have a look. It's weird. Goodbye.